Before I officially welcome my next guest this segment, I would like to play, just as a little refresher, all right, CNN having quite the field day with one of my guests, Dr. Simone Gold, after she visited the Capitol on January 6th. Watch.
An influential coronavirus skeptic who spreads vaccine misinformation far and wide and pushes a conspiracy that the pandemic was a, quote, pretext to take down the U.S., is also a licensed medical doctor and indicted January 6th insurrectionist.
Oh, no, that dirty word.
Nick Watt has more.
She wears a white coat, but not a face mask. Struts to a Ted Nugent tune in a promo video. Tours the country making false claims about the coronavirus.
Asymptomatic spread is not a thing.
And about the vaccines.
All the vaccine candidates have problems. They're all using the spike proteins, but the spike proteins themselves are what we doctors call pathogenic, meaning they're disease-causing.
That is not true.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so Dr. Gold, by the way, was already in D.C. on January 5th for a separate event. She went to the Capitol on January 6th with her friend John Strand, who was acting as her security. They were, of course, among 353 other Americans who went to the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. And they, of course, like many other Americans, faced multiple charges, including felony obstruction of an official proceeding, which carries a sentence of 20 years in prison. Now, Dr. Gold, who I'm about to introduce you to, if you don't already know her, took a plea deal, spent 60 days in prison. John was sentenced to 32 months. And after a year in prison, he was finally released today, this very day, this morning, thanks to the recent Supreme Court decision limiting the scope of the felony obstruction charge used to convict John and other J6ers. I want to welcome to the program John Strand, of course, former model and actor and insurrectionist, as we were discussing, and Dr. Simone Gold, founder of America's Frontline Doctors, and both of you, of course, being January 6th prisoners. Welcome, first of all. John, I don't want to be disrespectful, but Dr. Gold, I have been a very big fan of yours for many years now.
I'm a pretty big fan of her too.
Okay, great. I figured that you would appreciate that. So it's an honor to have you on, and I appreciate your courage and your bravery. So I want to ask you guys about all of this, but I want to get your quick reaction here on something that's actually happening today. Earlier today, we had pro-Palestine protesters fighting with Capitol Police, clashing with riot police, and I want to play a little bit of this. Just watch.
Mostly peaceful.
Yeah, maybe. Again, Capitol Police, so they are making their way to the Capitol. This is what's happening. And I'm just wondering, in light of, what happened to both of you, what should happen to these protesters?
We should be living under a nation of laws where there's no selective prosecution of people that the government doesn't like. Obviously, if we're arrested for behavior that was a fraction of that, we were just walking. Why are these people not being arrested?
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And have the books thrown at them also on top of that. So, John, you spent the last year in prison. You were facing 2 more. Let me ask you this first. How do you feel right now?
Amazing. I feel great. Yeah.
You take these steps out the door, and what's your first thought?
My first thought is, man, I can't wait to get back to work.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have any resentment?
I have resentment against evil. So.
Do you feel like what was done to you was evil?
The most evil thing I've ever imagined or experienced. Yeah. It's completely evil.
What was the most evil thing that you experienced?
That prize would probably have to go to isolation. I was abused and, in a certain manner of speaking, tortured for a period of 4 months. Blocked from access to my attorneys, blocked from access to any information about what was going on and why it was happening to me, in an environment that was physically so miserable and oppressive that it would take several pages of the book to fully explain it. But it's not anything you would wish on your worst enemy.
How did they get away with this? I mean, it's like, that's
Right. It's actually outrageous. So I'm a lawyer as well as a doctor. And what happened just in this specific example, not only did they throw him into isolation really for an invalid reason, he had done a media interview. You don't go to isolation for that. But then they didn't allow any contact at all with the outside world, including his lawyers. He wasn't
Right.
allowed to contact his lawyer. So how it happens,
is that not illegal?
Right. So then Congressman complained, and Congressman then went to the Bureau of Prison Directors, and then she said she'll do something about it, but then she doesn't do anything about it. So it happens because nobody is afraid that anything's going to happen to them if they do these things. It has to stop.
There's no accountability in the federal government whatsoever.
So you were in isolation because you did a media interview.
That's correct.
So I hear a lot about the conditions, and aside from isolation, right? The conditions of some of these prisons, or at least some of the cells that some of these J6 prisoners are kept in. What were the conditions like where you were? Aside from isolation.
Yeah, they're poor. I'm not going to say that it's a Russian prison. I imagine Russian prisons are worse.
Right.
But here's the thing: prison is a terrible idea, generally speaking. Just as a concept, I don't think it's ethical or biblical, and I don't think it's something we should be using most of the time. So there's a lot of problems with prison before I get into the details of what that facility happened to look like.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even really want to waste our time with it too much, but it's a terrible place. It's full of terrible people, and I'm not just speaking about the inmates. All the people there are they have been subhumanized. The inmates and the staff treat them that way, and it's basically a criminal factory. So they're just factorizing criminals. They're just producing them.
And so I want to ask you guys, and I know the answer to this question, but I want to just to reiterate for the audience. Were you violent in any way on January 6th?
I spent my career helping people. I mean, that's what I do. I'm a doctor, all day long for 25 years as a board certified emergency physician. And then I changed my entire life to help millions of people I wouldn't even meet. So it is ludicrous in the extreme to imagine I would ever hurt anybody. It's just utterly impossible. So of course we were not violent. We didn't do anything. All we did was walk peacefully, generally through the ropes.
You walked. You were not violent. You did not damage any property, right?
Correct, yeah.
You didn't take any property.
No.
There was nothing that they could have accused you of that they would have wanted to tack on some sort of extra additional punishment because how dare you, as my friend Adam, move a lectern 30 feet and then leave. They couldn't even say that for you guys.
No.
Let's be clear. The judge in John Strand's trial acknowledged that he wasn't violent and hadn't done anything. Full on acknowledged it. Was full on angry that he was speaking publicly. He said it from the bench that he didn't want him to speak out.
He increased the severity of the punishment to set a deterrence that no one should dare follow John Strand's example of criticizing the government. He sent me to prison for criticizing the government. Think about that for just a second. What country are we standing in? So, and he was incensed that my specific criticism was that it is not possible to have a impartial jury in Washington, D.C. And last time I checked, impartial is in the Sixth Amendment. And he thought that was ludicrous. But even if it was ludicrous, which obviously we know it's ludicrous to think that, I'm still allowed to say it.
And so you could have taken a plea deal. And is that why you didn't?
So I'm not sure if there's anyone else that had the plea deal that I had. It's pretty insane. And it's why I called my book Patriot Plea. And I tell actually the whole story of where God's taken me through this journey from the start of my life through the COVID lockdowns that turned my life upside down and everyone else's, and January 6th and all of that. But they gave me a golden parachute, essentially, because they were hanging a 20-year felony, as you know, over my head with 4 misdemeanors, for good measure. So 23 years of potential prison, $500,000 in potential fines. And then they said, or you can bend the knee to the federal government and we'll give you a single misdemeanor. I would have been home 2 years ago, living a normal life, so to speak, right? However, I said no. And I said no because their plea deal is a lie. And it wasn't just any ordinary lie. I would have said no if it was an ordinary lie because I just don't play around with lies. But this was a very diabolical lie, this plea deal. This plea deal set forth a summary of events or a statement of fact that everyone swears to. And it says this all has a basis in fact, including the 20-year felony that we're going to take off. So we aren't going to charge you with it, but you're admitting to being guilty for it anyway.
Right. Right.
What kind of a plea deal is that?
Right.
I'll tell you what kind of a plea deal it is. It's a plea deal that sets up the government to set their narrative and to destroy the civil rights of everyone that gets within 10 feet of it. And it establishes their story that there was an insurrection and these people all planned in advance and had a criminal mindset. They fabricated criminal intent out of thin air. So,
What, Dr. Gold, what was, I mean, obviously you took a plea deal for obvious reasons. You're a doctor, you have patients to see. You mentioned earlier, your entire career, you're helping people. So you had a lot of people to help. What was it like to watch your friend go through all of this?
May I just tell you, it's really, people say I couldn't go through it. I said, of course you couldn't go through it. You'll never meet another person like this who was given an opportunity to do 30 days or 60 days on a single misdemeanor, instead looked the government in the eye and walked right into the fire. I couldn't do it. And I think I'm relatively brave, more brave than the average bear.
I would say so.
And I couldn't do it. I had a medical license and a law license, a nonprofit to lead. But in addition to that, I just didn't think I could do it. That's very, very difficult. And I have tremendous admiration for somebody who stands up and says, no, I'm not going to participate in the lie, because, you know, you went to prison, so maybe other people downstream won't have to.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys, I'll ask this question to both of you. John, I'll ask you first. Do you think that January 6th was a setup by the deep state?
I know it was.
Tell me more.
I know it was because I've reviewed the evidence that everyone else has reviewed, and that's the reasonable conclusion. Also, I was there, so I know what happened and what didn't happen. I spoke to plenty of people to understand what their mindset was. I've reviewed the footage showing police officers violating their use of force protocol in many, many different instances. And now we're getting evidence to substantiate that there were not 40, which they've admitted to in court at one point, but like 200 different undercover operatives, and the list goes on and on. But something like that doesn't really happen that way by accident.
Right.
It defies reasonability. It's just not reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's kind of obvious that there was planning to this. It couldn't have happened. Also, on that day, there was much less media around than you would have expected. This was a crowd of 1.5 million people, and there was a total absence of media, which is very strange. But what I focus on the most is the selective prosecution angle, because we have to live in a nation where people are treated equally under the law. That's the Equal Protection Amendment. It's part of our birthright as American citizens. We cannot have a system where you prosecute some people and don't prosecute other people. You just showed that clip at the top of the show, right? The prosecuting some. So I'm very focused on the selective prosecution angle.
Yeah. John, did you have a proper meal? Have you had a proper meal since you've been out?
It's happening tonight, and I'm looking forward to it.
You already know where you're going?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you share it or no?
Oh, Georgie's, one of my favorite restaurants in the country.
Wow, I've never even heard of it.
Here in Dallas, it's great.
Okay, well, now I'm embarrassed. I'm from here and I've never even heard of it. I'll have to check it out. I'm sure by the time they're watching this, you will have already enjoyed your meal, and I can't wait to hear how it feels. And then obviously you have this very sick beard.
Yes,
Is it stay? I mean, I'm telling you guys, literally hours ago, this man just was released from prison. He's got the prison beard to prove it.
So this was inspired by a story called The Count of Monte Cristo. And I applied it sort of as a Nazirite vow that comes from the Bible to dedicate something for a purpose. So I made a vow that I would not clip or touch my hair or my beard until I was free, until I got out of the prison system. So this is a year's worth of growth, and it is what it is. But I really did want people to get a sense for how long I was put through this and what the federal government is doing to its citizens. Right? It's not about me. It's about the people. And if they're going to do this to Trump and then to Dr. Gold and then to me, it's going to be you next.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop until we stop it. Yeah. So I'm ready to stop it. If anyone wants to join me, let's go.
JohnStrand.com.
Yeah, please.
Great. That was great. So, and then you mentioned the book.
Oh,
which I'm very excited about.
I'm actually more excited about this than anything I've ever been in my entire life. And I really mean that.
So looking back on this, do you feel like God used you?
I don't feel like it. I know it.
Know it.
I know it with such specificity. It's actually kind of shocking. And I talk about that a lot in the book. I talk about a lot of things in the book. It's there's so much in there, and it's not going to be long or hard to read. It's actually quite exciting, and I kind of take a Hollywood actor movie approach to telling the story. And I tell a lot more than just the story of what I went through, although that's all in there with, and I mean bombshell, shocking levels of detail on corruption, on weaponization, on abject abuse and torment tactics and human rights violations and just filth that there are portions of the book where you have to put it down and come back to it because it's that heavy. But I tell more than just that. I explain from what I've learned for the entire time I've been on this planet and all the things I've gone through, including this last year, to understand what does all of this stuff mean. And like I was saying before, I don't think there's too much disagreement, left, right, everyone. I think we could get universal agreement on this simple premise. There's something wrong with our country. I don't think too many people, other than Jeff Bezos and that ilk, that are like, yeah, things are great, right? Everyone's like, yeah, there's something wrong. But we all disagree on how to fix it. However, I've also noticed that we're all doing the exact same thing. And we're expecting it to change somehow. That's the definition of insanity. But everyone's doing the same thing. So I think we need to sort of reset how we're looking at the whole big picture.
So johnstrand.com, when is the book coming out?
That's the really big question that I don't know yet, but as soon as possible. I'd love for it to come out before the election.
Yeah.
That's possible. That's pretty soon.
I hope it does, because it sounds like there's a lot in there that Americans need to read.
I think it would make an impact if people would read it. So
yeah, well, make sure to keep up to date, johnstrand.com. Also, America's Frontline Doctors, Dr. Gold. You are truly an inspiration. Listen, I'm known as the OG anti-vaxxer around here.
Nice.
So always, whenever I see a doctor who knows what they're going to be called when they stand up and go against the medical industrial complex, I just have such a deep respect for that. So thank you for all that you're doing. And John, thank you for joining us. I know you've got like the media hits lined up now that you're out of prison, but I do hope that you will get a good night's sleep.
I haven't had one in a year, so
that's what I was thinking. Maybe it's not tonight. You're traveling, but I can't imagine what it's been like just laying in an actual comfortable bed that maybe you can call your own and getting a good night's sleep. So I really
thank you.
I'll pray for that for you. Yeah,
appreciate that.
I think it's coming soon. So, all right, well, make sure, keep up to date with him. These interviews are so hard for me because I'm so happy that you're released, but I'm just so angry that this is being done to you guys. And so
that's a good thing. Pastor Tim Keller teaches that anger is really an expression that marks what you care about most.
Yeah.
So of course it must be directed properly, but we need to be very angry.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you guys. Please keep in touch.